Wholeness and Balance Vibrations family, we are ready to get started with this today. It's another Secret Energy podcast. We're definitely excited to be in the mix. Lots happening around the spiritual fields as we continuously speed into, not careen, into 2020. I'm definitely your host today, Seven Bomar. Some know me, some do not. This is a time in your life if you don't know me, and it's just because I definitely bring a certain level of awareness that many say has changed their lives. So I trust that even today's presentation will be enigmatic for you. And this is a session that we put together to actually address many of the questions that come to us in this path of enlightenment. And we look to get those questions answered in a balanced way. And we actually have some pending questions from last week. And so what this means is that I need to get my rapid fire together because we need to get caught up. And so I'm going to be answering questions right away. But before I do that, first of all, of course, giving honor to our ancestors and the DNA and the experience that we're having, because those are all entwined, that we truly write the future at every single moment with our actions and our intentions that we place in the present. So let us go forward being aware of this power and being responsible with this power. And then also with the information and the knowledge that we share with others, we do our best. And even today, what I'm presenting and what I will answer, I'm just doing my best. But I will say as a disclaimer, it is somewhat of my opinion. I guess here is the disclaimer here. Some of these things that we talk about can definitely be life altering in many ways. And so that means that you have to practice your own discretion, especially when taking the suggestions that we ask you or tell you about that you should follow here. And so let me just take a quick moment to gain some balance just in getting in here for the first time in a week, because it's been about a week since we were on last, obviously. We're going to have a giveaway today, and that is also going to be for a complete season of, okay, I'm just say seasons from now on, forget it, a complete season of the Innerversity. And that is an university season of your choosing or semester of your choosing, either one or two. That's about a $300 value. And so that's what we do every single week. We give something away. And so that's what's happening this week. Also, we've kept alive our coupon for 30% off on Sundays, just as a part of us continuously wanting to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to balance themselves with the amazing elements that we've presented within our store. So with that being said, let me also catch up on exactly where we're at in the questions from last week. And also, if you have a question this week, I would maybe wait to see if your question was asked already. But if you feel like that you just cannot wait, then you can type question before your question. And someone in the tribe, not just anyone, but our powerful moderators, way showers, and space holders will actually take that question and funnel it to me on my side. So that's how we're handling things. So let me look over here. Definitely sending a wholeness to all those joining the conversation today. I see Germany's in the house. Lots of familiar faces and some new faces. So thank you so much for joining the stream. This is the time, again, that we come together as a tribe and family to actually speak on some of the most, what we feel are purveying and prevalent topics of today in relation to consciousness and metaphysical growth. That's what we do. That's what we're engaged in. And again, we do our best. So we're also wrestling with something that's somewhat of a paradox. I mean, a big and a small, a light and a dark. And so in doing that, it takes us to use the whole part of our consciousness. This means left brain, right brain, and being balanced in the center in order to actually get the full 360 view of what we're speaking on. So that's what I do. I also speak from experience. I've been in this my entire life, maybe multiple lives, just engaged in spirituality, which is also the study of spirits and reading the energies, the signs, and the symbolisms that comes through the reality. And even doing the one-up and actually creating platforms like we have secretenergy.com with a plethora of resources that allow us at every single moment that we wish to dial in more into resonance. I also want to bring awareness to the cosmic energy section on the Secret Energy website. You can go ahead and take a look at that by migrating to secretenergy.com and then clicking on your right menu and then going down to cosmic energy. And what that does is it allows you, after you click on the day of the week, to see the energy that's coming across on a metaphysical and occult level, and to be aware of not only how these energies move around, but also to harmonize yourself by putting yourself onto the current of the cosmos rather than using a motor or motivation. What are we talking about? We're saying that there is a way that if you actually align yourself properly with the energy that's coming across anyway, since there is going to be every single energy revisited every week, every month, every year, that you can actually move throughout the experience and actually go with the power and the energy that is in balance and in synchronicity for that day, versus choosing to do it how you want to do it and going in sometimes into the turbulence of when you're actually off a little bit with the energies and how they're coming through. So we invite you to checking that out. Along with all the different things that are available on the website, we have ohms where we award you for mindfulness and mindful deeds. And you can actually use those ohms to purchase over 150 plus products that are actually on the site, all related to metaphysical growth. And lots of other nice treasures in there. You can also get involved in our affiliation. We're not being stingy on this side. We're sharing the love. So if you want to recommend people to the site and your friends and other seekers to the site, we will actually compensate you if you use your affiliate link. And there's enough on the site to tell you exactly how to do that. So I won't get into that now. So let me just look at where we left off last week. Somebody was asking about sugar addiction. I think that's where we left off. And we had some questions about the reptilian and mammalians. Let me just get a second to catch up. What do you think about this simulation theory and the work of nesting? Okay, and is there indeed a direct partnership between processed foods and how is one able to see the future seconds before it happens? What is deja vu? In the book you wrote, the code to make sure you say you can fly, ability to do superhuman things, and that you'd go more into it in addition to how does one do this? Okay. All right, so we'll start there because I think that is the question that we left off at. And let me make sure everything's coming through clearly. Someone's saying hit the like button. Yeah, definitely hit the like button or subscribe. You know, if this is your first time jumping in, it does assist the channel because I think it's one of those things where people say, oh, other people are in that channel. I'm going to definitely be a part. Maybe there's some knowledge there. There's always knowledge here, but this is kind of still underground. We're at 111,000 subscribers, which seems like a lot, but we've also been doing this for 10 years. So that's, you know, pretty incredible. Even me seeing 111,000 subscribers, that's amazing. That's great. But we like to see that thing with 1 million on it because that's what we feel like it deserves. So like and subscribe, and you'll always get the notifications of when we're going live and what exactly is happening here. So to jump into this question right away, it is actually about, and let me make sure I push everything live here, and let me get my live view going on. Bam, bam. All right, so to answer this question, the question is that in the Code of the Matrix that I wrote about, that you can fly and you have the ability to do superhuman things and that you go more into it in addition to. And how does one do so? And of course, this is not just a one answer question. You can do it by rubbing on this sacred piece of paper, and after that, wada bada bing bada boom, it'll happen. That's not exactly how it works. It takes a lifetime of dedication, meaning literally having the intentions of an entire lifetime all in that moment to be able to accomplish these things. And I'm going to speak directly to that, of how to get into a space where you can eventually do things that are way beyond what others feel like they're capable of doing. And the first thing, of course, is to just be aware of resonance. There's a consistent build that happens with one who actually aligns themselves with the cause of the cosmos. And we talked about that with the cosmic energy calendar. But remember, that's how you power up. That's how you course. Because every time you make a circuit completely and you don't break that circuit, you actually gain more awareness, more power, and your foundation becomes more firm. So then when you're taking off flying, even if that's just in your consciousness, then you actually will be able to land. If you talk to anybody who flies planes, they'll tell you the thing is not necessarily taking off. It's making sure you learn how to land. And that's, of course, what we really learned over this experience, because there's somewhat of a neophyte approach in the beginning. You just want to throw electricity from your hands and fly across the cosmos with no consideration of what that would do if you did that across a Dodgers game and how that would actually affect the entire world from you actually doing that. So we've been created inside of a space that actually allows us to practice a certain level of maturity with these StarDust or these powers, if you want to do some more research on what you're capable of doing as far as what has been mapped out already. It's called the SIDDHAS. That's SIDDHAS, I believe. And this actually gives you a full scope of what you're capable of doing with the metaphysical bodies. But since you must crawl before you walk, it actually requires you to engage in the balance of the mind, the body, and the soul, and actually bring them into unison. And rather than give you all the details to that, because I spent the last 10 years doing that, I would invite you to synchronistically doing the 8-ball with the recordings that you actually see inside of this YouTube page so far, meaning that go to the page, load all the videos, and then just look at one and click on it. And I'm sure that it'll actually bring you some awareness of how to achieve what you're looking for. But even more than that, we have an area on the site that's called Real Search. That's REEL Search. It's also in your right menu. And when you click on Real Search, you're brought into a page that allows you to be able to type by keyword, what you're looking for. So I hear complaints all the time. People say, Seven's all over the place. He talks about all sorts of stuff and it doesn't make any sense. And that's a little harsh, but some people say it's done wonders for them. But if it is coming at you and it's coming so fast that you're not able to really digest what exactly you're looking for, you can always go to Real Search, search by keyword, and type in things like lucid dreaming, flying, and you'll actually hear videos where I've talked about those things specifically so that you can gain the awareness of how to accomplish that in your life. So that's the answer to my question, since it is broad and wide open of how you can achieve these kind of superhuman things. But I will tell you, it is possible, and addition to is you. Right? So I never wrote another code to the matrix because I'm living in the code to the matrix along with the tribe and those of us that have collected in this co-creation. And I will also say that we're doing amazing things over at Ambassador Training. If you can take the time and the opportunity and you even have the resources, you can actually jump into Ambassador Training and get in with us. There's always new stuff happening. There's something major happening even in the tribe right now where we're going over vegetarianism and we're actually really looking at what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the uses, and even eating meat. What is the proper way to eat meat and what are the misconceptions? And all of that we're diving into right now. And it's actually going to be something that we're going to be visiting over the next 3 weeks. It's going to be explosive, obviously, because it is a very touchy topic amongst those in the conscious community. But we find that there's more clarity needed in that area. So if you like those kind of things, I'd welcome you to Ambassador Training. And if you're a little strapped for cash right now because you need to clear up some energy, we got specialist training for you. It's absolutely free. You can jump in. You can get season 1, season 2, and actually start dialing into sovereignty because we're right at 2020. And we have this thing we call Sovereignty 2020. And what this means to us is by 2020, you need to have your, part of my French, shit straight, meaning that you actually need to really get balance. It's mirroring itself in the 2020, perfect and clear vision about everything, complete wholeness. And the way to actually obtain that is also to dial it in from a resonance level. So there's a lot of things that we go through. There's a mode, right? And also you need an environment. You need others that are going to share those experiences with you. And that's what we've created within Ambassador Training. And then we're inviting you to the onset in specialist training if you're not ready for the complete commitment. So links for that are always supplied. And the moderators take care of things. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can also, if you don't find those links, those connections, hit us up at the bottom of the site in the bottom right corner. There's support there handled by Intercom. And me and my brother Sean and anybody else that's in support will assist you if it's during the right hours in getting to that information. But we always get to everyone. So let me speed on to the next question. It says, is your imagination your soul? Now, the reality here is that we have two terms here. We have the term that's called the spirit, and we have a term that's called the soul. And often these are actually interchangeable for one another in occultism these days in metaphysics. However, one was clearly distinguished as one, that the soul is actually, well, both of these actually are really confused because the soul actually refers to one, right? Like, so we would say in this context that it's all of the spirits all combined in one. And we'll go for that right now. That has a tendency to be the cognate of the sun, as Latin in the sun is soul. Right. And then we have the spirit, which seems to be the individualized form. Once you break a piece of the soul off, you get spirits. And each of these spirits are actually existing and coexisting together, but still feeling they're separate. OK, and this actually correspond to the left side of the brain, which they call the I-ness. right? And this I-ness discovery in its most purest form was discovered when separating the two halves of the brain, which has already been done. People who experience seizures consistently had to go through medical treatments in the past of actually separating the two hemispheres of the brain. They've done that. There's research on that. And what they found is that the left hemisphere seems to be really where the person's identity, the I, the one, is actually contained, and it speaks from that level. This is how I'm feeling. Versus the right side of the brain seems to be much more abstract and connected to an everything or an all, and seems to have almost no awareness of just being an I, and only speaks as a collective and refers to things as such. So with that being said, to answer your question, is the imagination your soul? I would say if imagination means the image nation, meaning the nation means we're all sharing it, absolutely. The imagination is the collective build, or what we would say is the hive co-creation of what we're experiencing now. But unlike what most people think, that it's gaseous, that you don't actually see it, that the imagination is not real, we find that actually everything around us is particleized to a certain degree, not necessarily static or solid, but when you phase into it via resonance, it becomes a foundation. This means that in your consciousness, this is what you say, this is what I know about. This is a chair, this is a desk, this is my family, this is the earth, this is the ground. And we feel so strongly about that it is what it is. And we do that collectively, and that's how we do amazing things as collective. And we should always draw upon that power. Our ancestors have been able to do exemplary things that are even difficult for us to do now in the I-ness kind of reality that we live in now. Back in the days, it was all collective. Everything came from the collective. So when the tribe all honed in their energy, especially into a focal point, that was accomplished easy. And this was their technology, which is a little bit different than the technology that we use right now, but nonetheless, either equally as powerful, but what we feel is even of a greater power, right? Okay, so the next question here is, I've been searching for techniques on total body breathing exercise. Can you further elaborate on that? And beyond the videos that I've actually published on YouTube about whole body breathing, which can be found when you just type whole body breathing, what I'm elaborating on is that we breathe generally very shallow. Even when the first Europeans arrived in Hawaii, they were given a name that meant shallow breather, because they were amazed that there wasn't an awareness of the power of breath and what you can really do with it. And we have a lot of souls around us that have already begun to explore that, started tapping into the bliss and the creative components that come with breathing, the regeneration, and all the beauty that is given to us absolutely for free. So when you discover the power of breathing, you sigh for one moment and realize, you know what, it's not all that bad after all, because still one of the most powerful things, which is clear and generally nobody can see, is still the most amazing gift and the most propelling thing to be able to use. And that's of course breathing. But the elaboration on this is that because of this shallow breathing, there's areas in the body that are not getting oxygen and oxygen is not reaching those areas. One of those areas is the diaphragm. So let's imagine then Michael Phelps obviously has to have more wind than everybody. Now, wind is a cognate of win. You got good wind, you're going to win every single time, right? So what this is really about is obviously there's a practice of breathing and continuously trying to fill these areas in your body by doing the whole body breathing. So that way they get blown out like sacs. And then when you actually get those areas full of what you would call oxygen, then that oxygen is allowed to cultivate itself in a different way and actually become some of the higher stages of the prana. And then this equals a different kind of fuel. And with this fuel, you're capable of doing and experiencing amazing things. So that is not just the concept, but the truth around whole body breathing is actually getting yourself into a stage where you're not just shallow breathing, but you're actually discovering the powers and the wonders of filling your consciousness, your body, and everything with this beautiful fuel that we're being given all around us. So I trust that gives you a bit of insight. And again, I would always welcome you to go into Google that and check out, or you look in YouTube and check out those videos. So this next question here is that, why is melanin people persecuted all over the globe? What powers are embedded in these people that opposers don't want unlocked? And I find also that these questions have a tendency to be questions to get me to answer things that people already know, which is fine. But I will say for the record that sometimes these polarized questions are like, well, let's hear what you say because I already know the truth. So this means that you're not really asking a question. You're just really seeing what I think about it. What I personally believe is that the world is polarized consistently. And while it may favor one frequency or vibration in one state, it then discriminates against another frequency and vibration in another state. I would just say, really, stop taking it personal. Find actually the middle ground in all of this. And when someone is crazy and psychopathic and imbalanced, and you start to try to figure out why they're that way, it actually makes you crazy, psychopathic, and imbalanced. Starts making you feel like something is wrong with you. And I just find in the reality that we can get pulled into those type of things, and then we start creating imbalances in our own consciousness and life. Also, if you're heavily exposed to one type of demographic, you can have a tendency to start viewing the entire world through that demographic. But you'll find if you go jump on a plane, maybe go to Australia, maybe go to Canada, maybe go to other places where maybe you have not been yet, you will find that what you thought was really going on and what was the judgments of the entire world are not exactly true. I know places where they love melanated folks and there's no discrimination going on against them. And of course, I know the opposite. And that seems to be how the world is conducting itself thus far, as it's recovering from this massive pole shift and trying to find the balance. So the next question here is, how do you access the Akashic records in order to view or heal your past lives, which will ultimately shift your future experiences on Terra? Okay. And I think what happens is that this concept of what the Akashic records really are, it seems to be, especially from some of these books that have been written, it seems to be to most like this literal, ethereal library that you go to, and you see all of these pages, almost like a Star Wars movie. You see all these pages of holograms of people's lives, including yours, and that you can just go into this hologram in this life and start moving things around and then start benefiting in the future. And nothing can be more fantastic as far as an idea. But is that truly what the Akashic records really are? And the truth is that the Akashic records are more connected to what goes on in your dream state, the Akashic world, if you may, in things, a world where you can affect even the things that are happening in this plane is actually the onset to the dream plane. So if the question is, how can one do that? That would be getting in control of the dream, which does take some intention. It does take some practice, and it takes some investigation about the elements that help you do that. Now on the site, we've just put in a lucid dream kit. Somebody's already saying it's worked wonders for them. I would suggest trying that. And then in addition, it's also learning things like what Sergio Magana has produced with the Toltec dreaming, which is for those who operate in the dream world and see that as central to their existence. They've already actually put together quite a few techniques of how to dream clearly and how to prepare yourself for going into the sleep and how to progressively rise yourself from the netherworld, which is theta and all the different frequencies of the subplanes, how to rise yourself through those planes in your sleep so that way you can become more conscious or lucid. And then of course in the lucid state, there's really no limit to what you can do. Like imagine if you spent 8 hours of the day, 6 hours of the day, whatever your sleep cycle is, doing absolutely whatever you wanted to do. I saw somebody ask a question about do what thou wilt, doing truly what thou wilt, but in an unobtrusive way. And I'll explain this because we talked about a bit in the ambassador training about the laws of karma and dharma and how truly that those laws were completely confused because people believe one of them is the bad one of them is the good one, the same dualistic approach. But truly what is happening is that if one is doing something without asking themselves why they do it, like let's say a fish swims, it doesn't ask itself why it can breathe in water, just like you don't ask yourself really why you can breathe air. When you're just doing something, you're actually in the dharma and you're not inheriting the karma. So the truth to all of this is that you have to put yourself into a stage where you can actually live your life and live your life unapologetically. Live your life in a way where you're going through the experience and you feel the experience to be natural, not an experience that you're constantly second guessing yourself if you're doing the right thing. Because then if you're doing that, you're getting into the karmas. Okay. So again, that's a little bit of the answer to the question. The next question here is, with what you know, can you give some guidance and daily practice and applications on activating Kundalini? Now, I cannot say enough about our original concepts about just activating Kundalini and going with it. First of all, Kundalini is constantly activating within itself. Kundalini is more like a seed that is developing along the way. And because of its power, it is developing somewhat at the stage of how your intellect and your maturity is also developing. So if you force yourself into a Kundalini experience, this often can jar your progress. It's almost like teaching a child about things that they should know nothing about at their level of awareness. But just efficiently in saying how one gets to healthily activate Kundalini. Kundalini is directly tied into your breathing. It's directly tied into your diet, whether that's building up or tearing down, whether that's cleansing or regenerating the organs, which we'll get into a lot more in the upcoming weeks. So activating Kundalini is not necessarily just the only part of it. Just like we talked about, the person who's flying the plane doesn't just think about taking this thing off. They think about how to land it. So this is not just activating Kundalini, but it's also maintaining a life where Kundalini has been activated, because there can also be this huge pole shift after you come into this massive stage of awareness. And many of us have been through this. Some of us call it activation, Kundalini activation, etc. And that's great for a few days. You have the eureka moment, and then you realize that nobody cares. And this is a total letdown. It's like a whole nother pole shift that happens again, because you realize that this is somewhat exclusive to your growth, and that it's not just that everybody wants to do this, even though you've experienced it personally. So what we're saying is that the practical applications for activating Kundalini are really tied into the breathing, the diet, and the environment. And without attempting to elaborate on every single aspect of that, which we've contained an entire body of doing that, I would welcome you to actually studying that body of information. Again, going to Real Search, typing in Kundalini, and seeing the videos where I've talked about it in so many different dynamic ways. I've done a 360 completely on the energy, the etymology around it, the actual correspondences to the energies, that's using where it resides, why it's in the base of the spine, what happens when it gets into the skull. So I've talked about a lot of that. And so I would welcome you to that body of information, but I will also welcome you into also being very mature with Kundalini and realizing it is a real power, it is a real force. Some think that it's something that's just going to liberate them, but Kundalini can actually destroy everything. In fact, Kundalini has also been connected to, at times, the destroyer, because it breaks down things. It can break down perceptions that have been built up falsely. So in that, you want to practice the caution and the adepthood and the awareness that it takes. So review all of the information on Kundalini first before you go tampering with your consciousness and seeing if you can cause a Kundalini experience. And that's my advice. So the next question here is, I'm hearing people say women who decide to have children have no purpose. That is the sole purpose of the woman, to have children. But this seems very one-sided. Actually, it is one-sided, because there's another part of this, and we've been cracking into this lately, and it's going to do wonders for us. It's still setting in. But the other side of this is actually the consumption. I'm literally saying that it is actually more important for us to look at what we're consuming than it is to look at what we're reproducing. And I know that, that may sound strange to others, especially those that really predominantly want to focus on kids right now. And we're doing that. This is a continuum, so we have to hold up several things at one time. But one of the biggest things is that look at before the creation, which is the consumption. What are you consuming that is creating what you're producing? Because that is always the process. So if it's one-sided, it's because of that. Those people are not looking at the consumption and then understanding the production. And of course, saying things like women have no purpose because they're producing children, that is sexist, racist, masochistic, chauvinist, and every other ist in that category, because it makes absolutely no sense. And that's just coming from an imbalanced space when someone says something like that. And the true balance of this, though, is to look at the consumption. Remember, whatever you create is going to be created from what you're consuming. So if you consume in balance, then it'll actually produce a more balanced life form. Because, of course, when imbalanced life forms are produced, what does everybody want to? Everybody wants to blame who? The creator. So it's interesting that every time, and this is kind of, I feel like that woman's plight is on the dimension. When everybody wants to celebrate the whole thing, they kind of go to the male energy, like, oh, thank you, Father, and thank you. And then when everybody wants to punish everything, like, oh, yeah, Mom brought us into this, and now we're stuck, and she didn't do it right, and all this kind of stuff. And that's all the immature nature of this reality. But, of course, you being adept, you won't fall for such things, and you'll realize that each force actually plays an important role in the growth in life of all the seeds that we're planting continuously. So the next question is, how do we manage fear when on the Christos DMT? And what I'll say about this, because I'm really cautious these days about recommending to a person that they should go and do something, because you can't generalize about this stuff. You have no clue of who you're talking to and to what extent they're going to take what you're saying. So with this being said, I think we can remove the DMT component and just say, well, how does one manage fear? Okay. And fear is only managed when you come into balance and not have such a crazy polarized idea of what's happening in the reality. And this actually takes some exploration in self internally, exploration with self externally, and seeing all as self. Right? And when I say exploration of self internally, there are many things about what we do, even though they're in our own little measure. It may not be as great as when a mass of people do it, but in our own measure, we do things that we're oftentimes afraid of in the society. I mean, even let's take killing. You may run into a few bugs with your car, so you have done some killing. But of course, you may have a fear of a killer until you realize that, hey, I'm actually doing in my own proportion the same thing that I'm afraid of. And then you start exploring that road and seeing where that road takes you. And this begins to decrease the amount of fear. Likewise, innerstanding, as we call it, just becoming more aware about the real purpose of death, and that's pretty fictitious, the whole death thing. It is a point where the circle is now completing its cycle and restarting again. So if we see even the most greatest thing that puts fear into most people, which is death, even though I believe pain is a bit more of what people try to associate with the fear of death, but because death is that point where people feel like that's where their fear comes from, it's about conquering death. Actually coming to the awareness, not just mentally, not just spiritually, and also physically, but on all levels, coming to this awareness of the purpose of death and what really happens after that phase, which is the transmutation. And that truly, when you really sit down on this and you really think about it, you'll actually find that people are more afraid of everlasting life, immortality, than they are of something like death. Death means that if I get into a bind and it stops working out and I need to reboot, and I want to start over again, I created this thing that's pretty much impossible for a mortal being called death, where I can really stop the cycle and start a new cycle. Versus if you just sat in on, I'm going to be here forever, this is going to happen forever, that actually is going to be more of what people are concerned about. So it's really about flipping some of these concepts on their head, isolating what you feel like is bringing the most fear into your space, and then digging deep into that fear and seeing where it's present with you, but also see where it's resonant with you in order to nullify its overall hold on you. And this is very simple and it tends to why it works, not necessarily doing it, but why it works. It works because two frequencies always cancel out each other. So you start having this quote unquote frequency gun that allows you to fire into things that you feel like are the nemesis of your path and just cancel it out so that you can move forward from there. So that's the advice that I would give on just managing fear, because of course, if then now you're in a DMT experience and you haven't managed this completely and now you go full throttle, you're just going to go full throttle into one of your polarizations. So whatever is the darkest, most unexplored, evilest thing is more than likely what you're going to start focusing on and intensifying in the amplification. Also, meditation is the technique and is the key to begin to work through these spaces, because you can have a DMT-like experience in the meditation, whether that is a fear-based experience or not. But it gives you the power of walking through the front door, meaning that you can directly deal with and encounter it rather than walking through the back door, which we say is what substances do. We're not saying one's good or bad, but when you take substances, you're walking through the back door of yourself. So you're kind of sneaking in. You're getting into that stage and you've utilized something to take you into this stage. I'm not saying you should not do this, but the other one where you use your breath, you walk into the front door, so you don't actually feel like a film between you and the experience. It's very dynamic. It's even much more dynamic, I believe, personally, than substances if you can accomplish this with breath. And this is because with substances, you can always recall, well, I took this substance and that's why I'm experiencing this. That's the film. right? So you still sitting kind of behind something as you're experiencing things. And to me, this can kind of create sometimes more fear in a situation because you feel like that you're being blocked from this huge monster and you're glad that this film is actually there, this cage is actually there, versus when you walk through the front door, it's like you're kicking down the door to your own kingdom and you're clearing things out and you're saying, hey, this is my stuff. I'm here. I'm the master of this. I'm the Lord of my own life. I'm the ruler of the center. I'm the great arbitrator. Get off the throne. Get down back to the coccyx or into the feet or wherever you belong, and which is where fear comes from, right? And then you actually begin to become the ruler of your consciousness. So that's what I'll end on that. This next question is Dr. Delbert Blair mentioned in the original organ, etc., the soul, and the synthetic tech, the soulless, which made me wonder about how this corresponds to oneness and how to integrate it into the no. Now, this is a great question because you actually answer the question in the end. And this is because we're all in a stage of learning and understanding. And remember, we have teachers that they teach 3rd grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, kindergarten, graduate degree. And we respect our teachers and we honor our teachers. And we often realize some of our teachers even sacrifice their entire lives, even of progress, just to remain at a certain grade with us to get us through that process. So while this type of knowledge about just an opponent, an adversary, can be very instrumental to propelling oneself to change their life, we'll find that at a certain stage, because everything changes. That's actually the only thing that we can guarantee in this, is that everything's going to change. You'll find at a certain point that the message will no longer serve you. It will no longer actually make any sense. You'll start realizing in your empowerment that you're actually everything, and there's just no arguing that. And on top of that, because you're everything, you're actually much more massive. So maybe these things that we're talking about and referring to that we think are, let's say, our harbingers, need some instruction and are only our children versus something that we should be running from or separating from. So the ideas of a synthetic world and synthetic beings and all this, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm just saying in that state, though, you're not going to be more vast and more powerful than a being that is aware that all is self. So if we gravitate into the stage and in the frequency and the resonance and the tribe and the co-creations of all is self, we won't find ourselves being assailed constantly by the ideas and the energies and the vibrations of things that still feel that they're separate, no matter what they're made from. That's what I have to say about that. So this next question is, what is a way you professionally found helpful to engage and start children in their understanding practices? And a family unity practice, we use the cosmic calendar. The cosmic calendar is great. And it's also because kids, they're more fun about this. They're not just into the morbid side of things. And oftentimes the parents, especially vaccinated ones, have a hard time locking into that frequency because everything is so serious. And this is why comedy is a great component and a great instrument to teach from. Naturally, we are laughing beings. We enjoy things. That is actually a big part, and I want to speak to this. This is a big part of our co-creative, co-collective faculties. So what happens is, so left side of the brain, right side of the brain. What happens is when these two are twined in, because we're in an I-ness world, we're in a solar condition right now. There's a lot of progression being made. But also the world feels a little lonely. It feels like it doesn't have God and all this kind of stuff. And that's all a part of the one versus the collective, right? So while we get progression from individual creations and uniqueness, a lot of times we wane on the collectiveness and building things together. Okay. And so because we're in a product of that reality, we have to actually, because we became a product of that kind of reality, we have to make the adjustments within ourselves. And so when you start thinking about creating things with children that are collective, and then how they're all going to like it together, then this starts actually putting you into the field of realizing the power of things like the comedy and having fun with stuff. And it's because here's what was noticed when separating the two sides of the brain, that when the brains are twined together and you're in the I-ness can start promoting a degradation, an actual degeneration, a boredom, an automaton kind of stage in the I-ness. Because remember, the I-ness is a bit lonely. So this means that naturally the person in the I-ness will start becoming like a little bit more on the emo side. Like, things are not working out and it's not happening for me. And then what happens when the I-ness takes lead with that, when the left brain takes lead with that, which is happening with most people because that's the pole that we're shifting on right now that we're bringing into balance. So when it takes lead to that, the only thing the right brain can do is confirm that with the all. So this means that we would go into this cycle where the emo would start saying we're all alone and nobody loves us and things won't help. And then the other side of the brain would start confirming that and confirm that as a collective. And this would give you a collective environment where most people would feel like, yeah, we're all alone, we're all doomed, it's not happening, okay? So what they say, though, is that because that's degenerative, it actually creates diseases, it creates distraughtness, you just don't want to be around, you don't want to be a part of anything, and this is what ensues. But then they said, what happens, though, is when you are surprised for one moment, happy for one moment, illuminated, excited, any of those things, you actually disconnect both sides of the brain for that moment in that twine serpent entanglement, right? It disconnects. And then this other right side of the brain takes over, like starts leading with the all and the optimism, if you may, right? And they say during that point, even if the person is experiencing excessive pain, even from disease, ailments, etc., they feel relief and they don't even think about the pain in that moment. This is like, let's say I'm on the hospital bed, I'm super sick, it's all over for me, it's according to what I'm thinking. And then the love of my life walks in, right? Maybe I haven't seen her in a long time or whatever. Something exciting comes in. For that moment, I'm not even thinking about the pain. I'm not thinking about any of that. I don't feel any of that. All I feel is the excitement of being in the presence of this engagement, okay? And the reason why I want to bring this up is because this is the proof of that if you're constantly experiencing something new, if you're constantly feeling renewed and feeling excited and feeling that you really want to be in this, this is the actual process of regenerating consciousness and regenerating your existence and tapping into your immortality versus the other one, the I-ness, the solo, that's going to pass away. And this is because we all came from the collective, right? Now, when I say pass away, it's going to pass away and it's going to renew itself again. It's like the sun god in itself. It's going to go to the death, the burial, the resurrection, death, burial, resurrection, death, burial, resurrection. It's going to continue to go through that cycle. While one side of the consciousness is like, hey, it's all one thing. There's no parts of the cycle. But where we're going, and this is also very important because many think that we're actually going just back to the collective. And that's actually degenerative too. Anytime you're going back to something or repeating something, that's called degeneration. What we did in a previous generation, it's already been done. Where we're really going and where I encourage others to go, especially in 2020, is actually start taking the I-ness and the everything and now going into the future with that component just to see how much more powerful that is going to be for the experience. Give me a quick moment. So that's what we're talking about. So when we're talking about children, then what we are doing is we're bringing the children into more of a collective view because that's what they actually get excited about. They get excited about their own uniqueness and what they're developing. And then they also get excited about this collective form of our existence. And then when you throw comedy in there, what comedy does is comedy creates a bridge between the two that makes sure that the energy always goes in the proper direction. Now, I said it last show and I'll say it again this show. There is a heavy need for us to focus on this. Get people that are good at doing this and put them all into a sanctum together. Give them the resources that they need and let them create these materials. I've been personally engaged for a decade on assisting adult human beings in raising their consciousness into a certain stage of awareness. So equally as I put this intention into this, that needs to also be done for children. So I can't even come to you today because I've been engaged with working with adults and say, this is exactly what you do with the children. But I've already opened up the offering, especially on the fund site, to that we should fund mindfulness for children, but we're barely getting through just getting mindfulness happening for adults. So this is a big need, but all the time, let's say the most successful businesses, if you may, the most successful things come from finding solutions for things that you actually find as a problem, because those are also problems that others are experiencing. So the onset to this, I can explain of how we would want to approach it, but there of course is a need for the resources and the actual real groundwork that it takes to actually create those materials. So then we can get on here and say, this is the workbook that I'm using to bring this about for this child in this stage or age range, because that is another thing about children. It is not a one size fits all. It's not even a one size fits all for each human being. We've at least been able to get it narrowed down to 9 9 archetypes, but it's not a one size fits all that everybody should do the same thing. So too in children, there's different age ranges where there's a different stage of consciousness and a different chakra that is actually at the forefront, and being able to work in that space is going to bring the most success. But just blanketing it, that would be like trying to, it would just be out of alignment. So that's where the time and the intention is actually needed. Again, that invitation is open. We'll see when the world steps up to that invitation. And if I can get done with what I'm doing, I'm promptly moving to that phase next anyway. So that's what it is. And it's just like when you're building a house, the only thing that can speed up the process of building that house is to get more people in working on it. And the only thing that is going to allow generally more people to come and work on it is if they have the resources to spend their time and energy on doing that. And I'm not talking about volunteers. I really, I love volunteers. It's all great, but we need to get to a stage where we can actually start compensating people for the time that they're spending, especially because that's their energy. And if they don't get it from somewhere, they're going to have to get it from somewhere else because that's the way the system works. So I'll address that way and move on. The next question here is, I've been trying to come into balance, trying to let go of emotional possessions. I want to let go, but it continues to come back to my mind. Any advice? Check the diet. There's so much more in this, and that's why we invite you to ambassador training, whoever asked that question. And it's because when do you ever find this one size fits all, like eureka moment because somebody said something? And I say a lot of things, so it can happen in the span of the conversation, but there's generally not, for one person's question, the one size fits all answer that is going to be the conclusion of your traumas. This is why we need tribe. This is why we need that collective build, because there could be several things going on here. Now, what we've done personally to address this, and not just making it on everybody's responsibility to just join the tribe, even though that's available now, we always want to enhance things. So we do have our vibratory analysis form, which we're working on bringing live at least by the beginning of next year. And what this does is it allows us to ask the questions that will allow us to actually get specific answers to what exactly you're experiencing, because there could be different things going on. You could be screwing it up on the diet, whether it's building it up or tearing it down. You could be in an environment that is actually causing this. So because of those different situations, then those situations need to be addressed directly. So if you personally are experiencing in your environment emotional upheavals, or you're consuming things that have actually taken the body into an emotional upheaval, then this would predominantly be the reason for why you cannot release yourself from that kind of cycle. But again, that would be generalizing unless we knew a bit more about exactly what you're experiencing. So I'll move to the next question. Question: how important is it to change your birth name once we begin to come out of the matrix and go into the path of self-mastery? I believe that personally, if we put importance on something and we over-obsess on it, we're actually doing the same amount, if not a greater damage than whatever it is that we're trying to change. We have to learn how to practice an art that lets us see the benefit of every single thing that we've engaged in thus far. That way we don't live with regrets. So I'm just saying specifically, if we start saying that it's our birth name that is now our problem, and then you're actually creating another stumbling block for another brother and sister. Because if they can't change their name, maybe they don't have the money to change their name, they don't know how to do it. Now all of a sudden they're excluded from the kingdom of God because they haven't changed their name. And this is the doofusness. This is continuously happening as we peck on each other and say, hey, you need to do things differently in order to equal certain results, when truly what we need to do is we need to come into balance. So if you feel like that you're being told internally that you need to change your name, then do that. But don't stand on that as if that's the ultimate maxim to how to create a better reality. Because then what you'll find is, or a better reality for everyone, because then what you'll find is after you change your name, then you'll need to buy fat laces. Then you'll need to cut off one ear. Then you'll need to just cut your hair. And then you'll need to maybe shave your tongue and all sorts of different things that will all be still coming from that same energetic field, which is you're not enough. You're not enough. You now need to do this so you can become more. And this is not a very constructive I call it the beyond parenting way of really dealing with things. And I just want to address that very quickly so everyone understands that term, because we're going to be using it a bit more, especially in the future during these podcasts, is that we have kind of modeled the world after the structure of parenting. And I'm coming here today to tell you that there is actually something even beyond the parents. Okay. And just to be very specific, in parenting, you often chastise the child because you don't want them doing certain things. Okay. This is the micromanager. This is the one that has kind of been put in direct management, but not necessarily the person who's in charge. Okay. And this is because they teach with a dualistic tool that is like, this is what I want you to do. This is what I don't want you to do. And that's all based on my experience, which is still limited to my experience, versus an overarch or a macrobe, meaning a being that actually encases the entire thing, and we're all inside of that, is completely aware of all of the stages that you're going to go through, and is not feeling like you've done something wrong. Oh my goodness, she went the wrong way. I should have done better in raising her and all that. None of that goes on with this being, because the being knows all the cycles, all the chemicals, how it was all created, what are all the stages, and what are all the variants. So truly, all this being is looking for is the next stage of your change, not necessarily judging what kind of changes and things that you're making. Once again, hearkening back to the do what thou wilt, it is awareness that in the overarch, the bigger processing kinds of consciousness are not chastising you about the decisions that you're actually making, but actually know the decisions that you'll make based on your chemical makeup, versus the parents are the ones micromanaging the experience and saying what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So it's very important to understand the oscillations between the two. They both have a great importance, but one is somewhat finite while the other one is infinite. So we need to work towards even setting our reach beyond that whole parenting good versus bad aspect that we keep doing to ourselves, and start realizing the natural progressions of our growth and being comfortable with that. That way we can keep the body from going into a frenzy and being diseased. You know, you keep whipping a child and chastising a child, that child actually starts developing stigmas and issues. I'm not saying that you can't put in some form of discipline, but when you do it overkill, you often miss what results come from that 10, 15, 20 years later. This child can't speak directly to others that remind them of you. They can't look directly in the eyes of people when it's time to assert their position because you beat the crap out of them. So this is things that we now, especially as we bring things into balance, can start looking at and saying, okay, this is the result. And ultimately, you know, even though there's sometimes failures in this, that's what the human experience and existence is really about, is that we're all on the continuum. So you'll be able to look at somebody 80 that's been doing it all their life, and then you can go inside of that sanctum and then actually say, wow, that's definitely something that I'm going to adjust a bit more since I'm here at 20. And so when I end up at 80, I'm not experiencing those results. But if we're now like kicking the person down that's 80 that made those decisions and things, we're not realizing the purpose of each of these people. And that's why, or each of these forms of existence. And this is why in Zoroastrianism, as I've been mentioning a little bit lately, that it talks about that there are 7 unchangeable things that are occurring in the cosmos, but they're only there for the changeable things to occur. So the unchangeable things function as a foundation to be able to support the things that bring change. But if you're in this point where you're just the unchangeable thing and you're scoffing at the things that change, or you're in the changeable mode and progressive mode and you're scoffing at the foundation, you're out of place because you're not actually realizing the benefits of both. And that's what it's about to activate the regenerative components of the brain, is that you stop even seeing the I-ness as the evil one. Oh, the ego is the bad one, blah, 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 blah. And never realizing how it's taking us through a constant stage of progression, versus in the collective or in the everything and in the all, nothing actually changes in there. This is like when you look at the ancient culture, change was not welcome. And this is often talked about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago in certain books, that there was really no progression. Everybody just wanted to do the same thing. That's a part of the collective. And it has its benefits. If we all agree to do the same thing, it gets done really fast. But it also has its drawbacks because we don't progress. We don't actually go anywhere. So do you see how the cosmos is consistently using both of these forces, Widdershins and Diesels, Tauruses, all going both in the same direction, versus for us, we can sometimes become polarized in one of those fields. We are the character, we're holding the space, but ultimately, is that going to be our final destination? Is that going to be where we really want to go? Is that going to be what we want to achieve? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. We are trying to explore and experience through infinity. You don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again infinitely. So take the gift that you've been given of being able to use both sides of the consciousness in order to not only create a foundation for yourself so you can stand on it, but build through progression a new stage and make a foundation there and keep climbing. So that's what we're talking about. So the next question here is, I took a special hagstone, okay? Special hagstone with 3 spirits entwined within the stone to the Navajo shaman. And he started channeling Olden. And then I saw Olden personally afterwards. And how does this make sense? Only inside of your consciousness, which is vast. You know, when we start going into the nucleus of specific situations that are occurring with us, we don't really even need others to confirm to us what's happened and explain to us why it happened, because that only dilutes it. To be honest, because then, especially if I say something that you don't want to hear, like, what if I say Olden's the bad one? You know what I mean? That doesn't actually serve you in the way that it really should, and how probably this really impacted you from your own personal experience with these spiritual consistencies, right? So I ain't going to answer that question. I'm going to just tell you that experience was exclusive, and it doesn't have to make sense to everybody else, but if you experienced it, it made sense to you. This is your senses. This is your realm. This is your environment. And your veneration of these things that you're engaged in are actually manifesting based on the strength of your belief and your knowing and awareness of their existence. So it's a bit personal then, and shouldn't have to, again, hold sway to the explanation that anyone has to give to it. So next question is, when will you address the importance of crystal spiral creation versus the flower of life? Okay, so what this question is actually about is about that there's an angle difference between the growth of crystals versus the flower of life, okay? And what I personally believe is that this angle difference has a lot to do with what we would call the physical and the spiritual in the constructions of both of those stages, okay? So rather than one being more important than the other or better than the other, which is, again, the nemesis of our creation. We would continuously make opponents like WWF matches. Here in this corner is Flower of Life, and in this other corner is the original crystal growth structure, only bent at a 0.5, 0.36 angle, but one is better than the other. Ding, 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 ding. Go at it. And it's like, this whole approach is probably coming from too many X-Men comments and too much sports with the red team versus blue team. Because truthfully, what you can see within every variant of geometry is the kingdom. So the kingdoms are stacked on top of kingdoms with slight variance, because if you actually make something so different than the other thing, it won't bind. This is like, I was going to leave a vulgar, it's like you having sex with a dragonfly, okay? Physical dragonfly, physical human, and creating a dragonfly baby. It's going to be pretty difficult. And this is because the dimension gap, the angular gap, the geometric gap is too wide. So, but in between all of that, there is a kingdom supporting a kingdom and a stage supporting a stage where the geometry gradually shifts. And then things that are more like the geometric field that they're in start to harmonize and reproduce. But it doesn't rule out that you can't have a dragonfly human baby. That takes wisdom, meaning that what wisdom, knowledge of the air, knowledge of the kingdoms beyond the physical planes entail is exactly how to tap into the essence of things and combine essences and combine forces, right? But a part of that instruction is learning about these different geometric angular perspectives, right? The real geometry and the Euclidean versus the non-Euclidean. It takes that because that's the mastery in that realm. Also, the planetary energies and how they correspond to it, the angles of the stars and how they're pointing at each other, the spectrums of light and their variance. So you can see this is a connoisseur's kind of thing if you actually want to understand deeply and more about those kind of energies. So, but that is required. This is the graduate's course for one to delve into such things and to understand them truly. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about those slight changes and variance within the degrees of the spectrum. Now, Of course, I will also say, because I mentioned that one of them seems to produce a greater stage of perfection. Like if you're spinning a top, one is going to spin longer than the other. And that's just because look at what our entire experience is like anyway. The more we gain wisdom and awareness, the more we're able to actually go forward and feel more sustained, get less sick, be more healed. So what happens is that as things progress, we progress into a greater stage of perfection. So that's why you see the perfection change. But you can't look at the foundation or what came before, the predecessor or the precursor, as if now it's the wrong one, because then you're dishonoring your ancestors. So again, you can't expect me, and this is also the other thing. Nobody can expect me. I will never adhere to this what do you call that? It's like adhering to the expectations of others that are perceiving things externally, adhering to the expectations of something else that's external to me, and forming and shaping my entire existence around the external. This would be like if somebody didn't like what I said, then I stop saying it because they don't like it. And that's not what I signed up for. What I signed up for is for you to read my personal diary about my journeys into consciousness. That's what we're all here for. But if this starts to become like it has for so many, if I start covering a topic and I'm seeing a lot of thumbs down, I stop covering that topic. That's not what I'm actually here for, because then that would make me false. Right? And I would have to live with that. I would have to sleep in that. I would have to walk around in that suit of falsehood all day. And that's just not going to happen. It's not that serious for me. I'd rather just walk away from everything. So what I'm saying is that we can get to this stage of growth, which has to be exhibited, especially in those that we're calling mentors, by starting to, instead of going into these dualities all the time and brutalizing our consciousness with that mess, start actually getting wise and seeing what is the connection between things. So like I said before, some don't get how one is a precursor to two, and how two is the forerunner or the result of one. They just think one is this, two is that. So we got to always look at the in-between, because that's how you maintain balance. That's what this is here all about, is getting into that balance. And that balance actually starts revealing to you both sides. Now you have a complete circle. You don't have just the D, as we talked about, which is not good at turning a wheel. A D will not roll. Okay? So the next thing is, when the line between food and drugs, and it looks like I'm never getting to the end of these questions, is bleak. Man, they're just never ending. I love it. Okay, so, and look, I'm just seeing today, and there's 47 questions. So, hey, that means we got more for the future. So this question says, let me see what time it is. It's 10:01, and we have this hard stop. We really want to honor that 1 hour, because it's just important. Like ambassador training is stretched out. It's more extensive. So if you can you can ask questions, you can unmute your mic and all that. But this space specifically we created, I kind of see the drawbacks of 3-hour videos on YouTube, to be honest. People look at it right away. Nah, I can't do it. And then it doesn't allow the knowledge to get to them, versus when it's only 1 hour, I got an hour, especially on 1.25 speed. I don't think you can listen to this on 1.5. It sounds like Alvin, Simon, and the Chipmunks trying to explain to you the metaphysical realm of the entire thing, which would be funny, but maybe it wouldn't absorb as well. But I do want to keep it into that hour range, because it actually allows people to see it and say, okay, I can do an hour. I can give that amount of my time. And again, 1.25, you're at 45 minutes. You got that. But 3 hours and 33 minutes, which is somebody's, or is an auspicious number, that has a tendency to get ignored. I saw a brother of mine and I love to watch this stuff, and it was one of those, and I still haven't been able to commit the time to it. So just hindsight and being aware of that kind of thing. So I am going to keep this into the next 30 minutes. Next question here is, when the line between food and drugs is blurred, yet there's a war on drugs globally, how can we control what we eat when food is weaponized? Wow. Okay. Well, do the work. Do the work. Meaning that what happens is that I find, and especially now, since we're getting into this, and as I said, it's a whole nother conversation. I'm even going to do an expose on it. We're going to do some premieres on it. And it's just really deep diving into vegetarian versus meat eater and what's really the benefits, the pros and cons and all of that. But without getting into that right now, what I would say is that there's this overall act that we have in consumption, where we don't really not only just investigate, but actually procure. Okay, procure your path to your consumption. So when you procure your path to your consumption, this means that you leave that morning with this mission that you're going to find someone that is able to prepare this food that you're consuming the proper way. Maybe you take the responsibility to do that yourself, but you're going to actually make the effort, which you can go to the farmer's market to have a conversation. This is why I was saying that having a communal social state of consciousness is very vital these days, because when you get into solo, Mr. Han Solo over on the left side, he doesn't even want to talk to anyone. Feels like everybody is wrong in some way or another. Never seeing the benefits of the farmers and all these kind of different people that are responsible for actually maintaining your health. It's always like a judgment is what I'm saying. That's why this whole thing with the I-ness, and I'm saying there's pros and cons to the I-ness. The I-ness is like the only God mentality. Okay, I'm the only one. There is no others before me. While on the other side is the lunar or the moon or the nature and all of that connected together saying, y'all the Baal, no. Meaning that you are totally wrong about that. You're not the only one. I mean, all right, just stay in your stuff and I'm going to stay over here. So what this also means is that you're sometimes unwilling to have a personable conversation with people, tell them what you're experiencing and see if they have a solution for it. So for me, if there's a blur in my world of the difference between food and drugs, and I'm concerned about my food being laced with all sorts of stuff, I'm going to go down to the farmer's market if I'm in a city. Right now, I'm in a country that is high on agriculture, but it still takes me to do that. And actually find the farmers that grow the way that I need to consume, even go and visit the farm. Man, can I come over? They're always happy. Yeah, you can come over and take a look. You generally will never find the farmers and the people who produce food, especially naturally, say, nah, I can't let you in. This is top secret. But if you're in a processed plant or something, they're like, oh man, we have nothing but trade secrets in here and chemicals and formulas, and we can't let you in. You see what I mean? So find the people that are willing to allow you to come in and see what it is exactly that you're consuming, link up a partnership with them, because you know how that feels for them. It not only feels like they understand who they're cooking for or preparing things for, it also allows them to feel that their role, because of course with a lot of boxes sitting on the shelf, they feel less appreciated. And I'm just speaking to this directly of how you ensure that there's not something weird and wild going on with your food. And to be honest, you won't even pay more when you go right to the source. You're going to pay the price of the source, especially if you pull that in with other friends. And that's why this takes groundwork. You pull in with other friends. Yo, you trying to eat good food? Yeah. You trying to eat good food? Yeah. How much you got on? I got a 150 on it. 150 on it. That's how much I got. Oh, I got another 100 on it. All right. That's $500. Let's see how much of these fresh greens. You'll be finding that they'll even have it in an Uber delivering it to each and every house. But you got to put the intention there. If you're just stuck behind this wall of the food is poisonous and there's bad drugs and all this kind of stuff, that is actually not the solution. That may be the awareness, but it's not the solution. And this is where I'm at these days. I'm big on the solution. I'm so tired of hearing and giving the complaints. It's like me filing paperwork to somebody that I expect to solve my problem when truly I'm inclined enough to actually solve my problem. And on top of that, without me doing that, I'm becoming degenerated. I'm starting to become like, I can't solve my own problems anymore. And it's actually somebody else's responsibility to solve all of my problems. And this is not a way of becoming an adept. So this is where it all lies, and this is where it all stands. So next question here is, do you have any insights, to why when my Kundalini becomes active, one day it shot up to my throat and I could feel this energy in my mouth and moving like a ball of energy just there. But what are you doing with it? And this is why sometimes these powers don't return. They're like, I'm here. Say something, sing, speak, learn an instrument. Learn how to conduct this energy into something. I want to be transformed into something. That's what they call it, the muse. I'm filling you with all of this ethereal energy. And I'm looking for a catalyst to be able to bring this into life. I want to make a child with you. See, that's the other thing is like, we just think that there's the physical children, but we don't see how our ideas, the companies we create, and all the different things that goes on are all our children. And all that inspiration is fifth dimensional inspiration, fourth dimensional inspiration, over dimensional inspiration. And here it is coming in right now, but it's also coming sometimes through this polarized, lack of awareness, degenerated state of consciousness, and it doesn't feel welcome there or used there. So when you feel that, sing. Do something with it already. See what this energy is leading to, or else it's just like anything else that you don't use. It just goes away. So that's what I had to say about that. Next question is, what does it even mean or look like to have an open third eye? Sometimes spiritual things are so mystified, and many times spiritual experiences are not so mystical after all. You're right. See, the things that surprise others may not surprise you. Just like one man's trash is another man's treasure. This is how it all really works. So the truth about this is, what does it look like? To me, it looked like a cornucopic field of the old Secret Energy logo and lots of colors. And if you focus deep enough, you would see things in between the spaces within the spaces. You would actually see the variables in the colors that already look the same. You would see that things actually weren't flat, but actually round. And that all the clouds were actually spiraling around the sun as it's going through its procession, rather than them just moving across the sky like some Photoshop painting. You would actually see, when you looked at yourself, that you blended in and connected. You would see that there was a code of some kind of language of sorts running through your consciousness. You would actually see. So you get where I'm coming from? But also, even if you're not seeing all of that, to be here, to be aware. You see, like sometimes we put so much importance on exploring. But this is why in most of those journeys, you always want to come back. I'm telling you from experience that some of these journeys, you're not like, I want to go again. Like it's a fun ride. You're like, all right, I'm good for a few weeks. And then somebody offered to you again, like, nah, I'm good. I'm just staying grounded. Spirit's telling me to stay grounded right now. So what you'll find is that while there's a power in that exploration, there's also a power in the foundation, knowing that you can actually come home to something that is stable and not moving around and humping your face in cornucopic fields of mysteries all around you. You'll find that just being around your brother, just with your sister, and people that you can count on is a safe space. So I want us to honor both of these experiences, but I did give you a glimpse onto what happens when you blow that thing wide open. So this next one, this question is, does semen retention have anything to do with Kundalini? Absolutely. In many ways, all of the fluids and the liquids that we're using in our body have to do with Kundalini, because that's what it's consuming. That's what it's eating to grow itself and to make itself mature. So if we are expending those fluids, even like pancreas, eating sugar too much, insulin's going everywhere, insulin non-regulated, that's a chemical that's needed. It's a master hormone. Okay, so anything that is just consistently being depleted, sex all the time, the regenerative component is just leaking all out. It's not even cycling. It's not cultivating. It's not aging. And this is specifically since you said semen about the male. If the semen is not aging, they never become granddaddy semen. They never become OG semen. So they don't have the strength to move up. It's as simple as that. Weak, new semen don't have the strength to climb the spine versus OG semen. They'll be already up there in the Dantane area and making their way because they can stand. You see what I mean? The consistency, the fluids that they're being supported by allow them to make this journey to try to get to what we know as that narrow and thin gate, which is actually in the center of the consciousness, okay? So this is what we're talking about here. There is a big benefit at cultivating the semen. And just like also, there is a benefit in draining, lymphatic system drain. Even all the semens and all of the serotonins and melatonins at time, there's a time to drain. It's like, okay, let's empty all of this water out and then in these liquids and chemicals, and let's restructure and rebuild. Okay, so this is the flowing aspect of the consciousness that always must be maintained. This next question is, can you use the new herbs with one another? I saw like 3 or 4. I'd like to try it out. But would they disturb each other? And if I use multiples in the day? Okay, so I guess the question is here is in relation to the supplements on the site, is it cool to mix them together? And one thing I would already say is for sure listen to your body. The first thing is that I always try things separate, just like an Ayurvedic doctor would. You try it by itself first, see what it does. Then once you can feel what it's doing and you understand it, then you move on to something else. And then when you feel what that's doing, if you feel like you want a combination of the two, like an alchemist, then you mix them together in the proper proportions. So when you have elements in front of you, you just have an alchemical cabinet. Now what you need to see with your own makeup is what is the use of these different alchemical treaties, if you may, because a lot of them are blends themselves of other elements mixed together. What is the right blend that you can create for yourself? So that's how I answer that question. We got about 15 more minutes. Question is regarding the organ regeneration. You answered last week. I was not specific, not the ones I already have, but referring to the ones I lost. Fallopian tube, an ovary. Will it come back? Now, this actually starts to get us into a bit of what we're going to be talking deeply about in the next upcoming weeks, which is about rebuilding organs or planets. Okay? And to just give you a quick prelude into that, what we found is that there's two different kind of diets. And generally, nobody is doing either one of these diets the right way. We have in this corner the vegetarian who may be, in many tenses, eating processed vegetables, overloading on certain vegetables like kale and oxalate-producing elements, and actually even toxifying their body more, because the purpose of becoming a vegetarian is like a fast. It's like a cleanse, where you're going to break down all the calcification and the deposits and all the fatty acids and the irregulations and all that. You're going to give the body a break for a moment, which everybody needs. And so obviously, when you look at your standard vegetarian, they're like a junk food vegetarian. They don't eat meat, but they eat vegetarian pizzas and all this kind of stuff. Or they're extreme, where they're juicing thousands and thousands of vegetables and drinking all of that, and not in the awareness that there's a threshold to this. You can't actually stay in a cleanse forever. Okay. And then in this corner, we have meat eaters. You know, this is the guy that comes in, you know, he's like insisting that all of this meat is the way to go. And the truthful part of this is that they're generally only eating the choice cuts, meaning that they're eating the steak, they're eating the filet mignon, and they're eating the breast, and they're eating all this. But actually, what has been proved now factually, which again, we'll get into a little bit more in the next few weeks, is that it's actually the organs of the meat, what they call nose to tail, that if one wanted to rebuild different parts of their body, that's what they would be eating, not necessarily the choice cuts. So we find that the meat eaters are eating the wrong diet and the vegetarians are eating the wrong diet. Is there anything new here in this matrix that we're now discovering how to bring balance to? So that's where, again, that's the personalization of it, because we actually experience this in our daily lives, and we also see this going on in the community. So truthfully, if you're rebuilding organs, you build organs with organs. Now, this modern setting has got everything processed, meaning that for you to even come in contact with blood, this is even if a partner is bleeding. Let's say, for instance, one of your partners severs his arm. You're going to be able to call the police. Call the police, call the ambulance. You're not going to be in there like, yo, let's get some bandages on this wound. Let's press this thing down. Let's reattach the artery. Look, I'm going to clip off this. You're not going to be doing any of that, because you're coming from a processed reality where everything that you want, you call. Like you just call and order a pizza. You go in the store, you buy a box, right? And this is what's kind of happened to the reality and why so many people are confused, especially about these two diets. Because we're no longer actually in the stage where an eyeball is what we're arguing over. But if you go to the tribal setting, as I mentioned yesterday, anything that there's two of, everybody's arguing. It's like, yeah, I got the eye. Oh, I got the esophagus. I got the spleen. Because organs heal organs because they're made from the same thing. And that's where the building blocks and nutrients actually come from to build up. Vegetarian is very important because that's where the things come from that are solvents. Plants are absorbing the soul or the sun, and they're also cleansers. Even actual cleansers in the kitchen are made from plants, and that's what they're going to do to the body, right? So then what happens, though, is that if this starts to come in balance with peer groups, videos off of Netflix like Food Incorporated, and all this stuff is mixed into this, then everybody's just confused and weak from one side or another, and then they're not balanced because they're all warring against each other. And this happens inside the consciousness because we're not completing the circle of life. And this is what we're going to be talking about as we go on. But without elaborating on this proficiently, what I just wanted to explain is that in this tribal setting, when you're raised on a farm and you're actually raised in a tribe, somebody's bleeding, some organ needs to be eaten to regenerate all that is normal. But when you're living in a process propped up reality, like I said, where everything comes in a box, you haven't been exposed to any blood. You haven't been exposed to any eyeballs, any of the back room. I also mentioned before that, see, in the back room, this is like where humans get created at. There's eyeballs laying on the counter, tongues, brain parts, all this kind of stuff. And for you, that's like a horror movie, right? But their ancestors, that's what they had to deal with. They weren't dealing with chips where you drop them lightly inside and you solder them together and, everything's clean. You suck out the solder and, you rinse it off in a bath of distilled water. And, you're coming from this sterile ass fake processed reality. And that just is not how things are. So when you try to incorporate that falsehood into a full total awareness, a 360 approach at regeneration, something's not going to add up. Okay, so I'm only giving you a prelude. Some shit wasn't adding up. Literally. Some people have problems with their guts, problems with their bowel movements, problems with everything going on. And then while they're all like, namaste, I feel so well, truthfully, because a lot of these people are into the lying now, because you can lie to yourself. Right? You can lie to yourself. You can tell yourself this is exactly what is going on. But this also becomes akin to very abusive programming in relationships where you should be gone from doing that, but somehow you're still there. And so we're going to address this because this is the nemesis, what I call the nemesis of life. We keep doing the same thing over and over again. One moment I was like and this was years ago, like let's say 15 years ago, if you had come to me, man, I can hit you with a Jesus thing like Kanye's doing right now. And you would be totally into it. But after a few years and just reading into the obvious, not necessarily the emotional, but the obvious, reading the book, looking into the lucid world, seeing how some of the angels were acting in some of the beings that were there that are associated with the pantheon, it was obvious that there was racism even going on, that the beings weren't as pure as most people thought they were, and that there was all sorts of weird things happening. So then that was a big sledgehammer for me. Bam! Because I, in wanting to be, live, and always remain as truth, needed to walk away. Now, do you know how many people that are still stuck there because they're stuck by their peer group? They're stuck in so many different ways. They're brainwashed, they're programmed, all that's going on. And then it becomes the negative aspect of a cult. I want to put negative in front of that because I think a cult and culture all is the same stuff. But the negative aspects when you start getting damaged and hurt and now you're still there. So then you got to move on. So for me, the gift that I have, some people ask me about my powers. The greatest power I have is the ability to change when I realize change needs to happen. So then I moved on. But that doesn't mean sometimes you don't swing right over to the other pole, the other polarization, because you generally need to hit both of the poles. Both of those poles, you need to hit them before you can calibrate what's in between. It's like the body is an instrument. It must experience both poles in order for it to determine what's in between. And what you have people doing is experiencing one pole and then insisting that that's the only thing that ever should be done. And then they're completely acting from a space of imbalance. And imbalance creates disease. You're not comfortable. You don't feel fulfilled. You don't feel excited. You're most of the time bored. So this is where a lot of that comes from, but we'll address that deeper later. So again, regeneration comes from the components that regenerate. And then if you want to cleanse and tear down something that like some people can eat and consume so much, quote unquote, they become slobs. They've built something, but it's more like a big Slimer. You remember Slimer from the Ghostbusters? So of course they're going to need to come in there with light to cut solvents to, just like you're trying to wipe grease off of a counter, you're going to need to come in and you're going to do that. And you're going to have to probably even do that for years before you can clean up that slop and slime and mess that you created. But once it's clean, though, if you keep doing that, you're just going to now start breaking down your bones and you're going to start cleaning things that are already clean, but you're just going to wipe them away. And so this is what we're going to be bringing an awareness to in the next few weeks about how to actually maintain the balanced diet for the process or adventure that you're on. And I see this at times like the RPG game role-playing game where you come in and you have these three characters to choose from. There's the big Viking-like dude with the big axe, right? And he's the big big body, you know, the big beard, and because that's what his role is in the role-playing game. And then you had this little skinny ass elf with the hella precision though. He'll hit you with the arrow and a little pouch that he got, and he's just killing them from far off. And then you have the wizard, right? And each of these have a specific diet, but what you'll always find in the game is you need to use each one of these based on the level. You see what I mean? So if you're going to a different level in life, you need to be able to choose the proper character and the proper diet that is going to allow you to win that game, because everybody is counting on you. See what I mean? So that's the prelude to this. That's what we're going to be talking about. The last question here, and man, I guess we're like 1 week ahead, which is great because we're basically 1 week ahead on the question, so we don't have to like find questions. This question here is Kundalini a permanent or a temporary phenomenon? I can't seem to find the answer to this question. Why does it become very intense and active and then stop and then sometimes come back? And the actual real answer to this is a great summary in today's presentation. The poles, the polarization, it's coming, going, and then it's coming. But you really want it to remain and be consistent. Now, of course, this thing cannot remain fully activated, full throttle, all the way on that opposite pole all the time. You not only would be crazy to us, we will be crazy to you. And I've lived in that world for periods long enough to know everybody around you seems off, that you can see what's going on. And you judge immediately of what's happening. Kundalini opens up that world and lets you see all of those impurities and the parts of existence. But when that's happening, if your consciousness is not mature enough to really handle what you're experiencing, what then ensues is the isolation. And then at this point, all of the things start to work on you as if they're attacking you, meaning that when you get pulled off by yourself, this could be beneficial for a certain period. But if you stay in that solitude too long, then this depression and things start attacking you. And then next thing you know, where you're at, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm cutting. You know, I'm cutting off everything. I'm cutting off. And it's because you become almost too sterile in an environment that actually needs microbes. It needs a little bacteria. It's a little funk going on here. There's a dance happening. You see what I mean? Folks are sweating and getting into it. You see what I mean? So it's going to demand that actually happens for you. So if you're polarized, though, you just swing back to the opposite pole. Then it cuts off. And then you're like, well, damn, I guess I ain't spiritual anymore. Like, now all this is foolishness. And it's a product of polarizations. But then you're like, well, shit, you know, I used to have it. I used to be tapped in. And then I guess, I don't know, when I hooked up with John, it kind of cut off. Because then, of course, there's always somebody to blame. This is the problem with polarities. It's always something else's fault. See, in balance, you're an arbitrator. So you're actually completely present. See, to be completely present in your body, like if you're on one side of the body, you're not completely present. You're on that side and you're imbalancing a body. I ask you a question. The bodies, I'll say that. And when I say body, I mean all the bodies. How much can a person carry when they're not on a balanced foundation? How much can someone carry when they're not on a balanced foundation? When they're all in the, I discovered this, the whole thing. Is that a person that you can really count on and say, here's this, we're all counting on you to complete this, please come back? That person's going to get out there and abandon everybody. And this fanciful ideas and things that happen in that state. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. That's not where I'm at. I'm at a whole nother level of maturity with this. I'm not saying right and wrong. I'm beyond the parents now. I'm realizing that this is all about chemicals. This is all about that if you were wanting to study something to learn about the complete arcana of the entire existence, then you would at least know how the body works. You would know how the digestion works. You would know how the different parts and what they do. Because then when you knew all of that, you would know what not to do. You would know what not to eat at certain times, what to eat at certain times, what to say, what not to say, because you would know how the person was processing it. But yet, we rely upon these gurus, these teachers, and all these different external things in order to give us those insights. And if they are not well-rounded themselves and fully flexible, if they're not like within themselves realizing that, hey, you don't even know it all, buddy, there's no such thing as knowing it all. You can't contain everything in this limited consciousness all in a moment. And you need to be expressing yourself that way in order for us all to not feel like that we somehow missed the mark because we're not sitting in and doing what you're doing. Okay, so that's the progress. And we're progressing in this. You cannot say that I've been saying the same thing since the very day we started. This message continues to evolve and continues to serve more and more. It continues to get to an aspect of like, okay, now we got 50 million more people that we can now include into this message. But there's still 9 billion of us. So are you really scratching the surface? So the more that you exclude yourself from what you can do in this space, the more that you misunderstand about what's happening in this existence that always has been going on, the less you will be able to perceive and the less you will be able to interact with, which will be in direct contradiction to what you're looking to do anyway. So that's why I'm saying practice the balanced path. Roll with facts. Roll with wisdom from your experience. And never be afraid to, if you find yourself doing something that you may have been preaching on the corners about, to say if that is not exactly how things work, because that's how you progress. That's what got me to where I'm at right now. And that's what will take me to where I'm going. And you best believe, because my foundation will be solid, everybody that's with me will be going along the way because we're co-creating all of this. When someone says, hey, I have a question about this diet, in the co-creation, I get the same ping. Hey, man, I got a question about this diet. That's our collective power. That's how we built some of these massive structures. That's how we drilled holes 900 times faster than they can be drilled right now. That's how we created holes where precision equipment can't even get tools into. We did it with the collective consciousness. But we have to realize also that the I-ness is a big part of the building blocks and the components. The loneliness is where we oftentimes cultivate the greatest things. But just like the sun, as we talked about, the sun's energy is sometimes overwhelming. It needs to be broken down. We have to realize that each of these powers and components and tools have a use. So don't throw them away. Harmonize and realize their purpose in the space with you in this existence. Wholeness and balanced vibration, everyone. Thank you so much for joining into this. It's been amazing. It's always amazing for me. I trust that it's the same thing for you. We have a lot more coming. We have another round of questions to start jumping into this next week when we get into this. And yeah, I'm just excited about the growth that I'm seeing happen here. And I feel like it's coming at a perfect time because we're sitting on November. We're only basically a month and a half away from the opening of a brand new way of existence. Don't play with 2020 though. That's what I said in the beginning of this conversation. So it's a great place to close this. Just remember, you got about a month and a half to get things in tune. Don't go into fear about it, but really be on point. All the things that we talked about today were very instrumental. If you need to go back and listen to this and just hear piece by piece some of the jewels that is being dropped and what's really being said, so that you can become a more well-rounded being, because that's the space that is coming from. We're talking about wholeness, not just a piece, but the wholeness aspects of things. And then what I feel like also is that is going to allow us to connect and harmonize and get in tune with what is going on around us, and also allow those things to really experience the true power, the wealth, the resources, and the growth that we've been able to obtain. Because all of us here, at least at some stage, wasn't sitting on that, oh, it's only going to be for me and it's me against them. We came into this so that everybody can get to the next stage. The resistance was founded on total ascension. Everybody, nobody not included. Even some of the weird folks, finding solutions rather than harping on the problems. That's what this is about. So there it is. We breathe in and we breathe out. I'll take this now time to finally close the space, just closing the space. Thank you so much again for all the energies that have joined into this space. How many got online right now? I think we got, today's giveaway. Thank you, sister. Today's giveaway. So let's see what it is. We're going to Nightbot. And we're in our giveaway section. And so this giveaway today. Oh, no. No. The chat is disabled for this live stream. No, it's not. Let's try it again. Let me refresh. Give me 1 second, everyone. We're going to get into this giveaway today. Unfortunately, chat embed isn't available for the YouTube yet. Okay. Okay, here it is. Okay, it's populating. Let me just give it a quick second and let it populate it. Okay, there it is. It's populating. So let me just give a quick second. I guess in the meantime, let's see what we got here. I think some of the questions came back from last week. Yeah, just a few of them. All right, so in respect of the time, I'm just letting this populate because I did have to refresh the screen so it gets in all the eligible users today. Lots of wholeness coming through. Sometimes I'm just amazed at the level of growth. And growth is what it is. Like, it's funny because you could just swear you know everything until it's the next time to grow. And the most important thing is just to get used to that. Like, just make yourself comfortable in the processes of constantly being amazed about what you're going to experience next. And like we said, even anatomically and psychologically, metaphysically, that separates you from this continuous degenerative process where one very negative side of the consciousness is being confirmed by the manifested side of the consciousness. Manifestive side of the consciousness, the collective side, which then creates this collective depression. We separate from that for a while. Separate those two sides. Be the arbitrator standing in between. And this then allows you to choose being everlasting, being excited, being thrilled again. And that begins the healing of the pain that you experienced in your payment for your lessons in the universe or the university, your tuition for you to learn your powers and your gifts, not just because they were given to you, because you won't recognize them, but because you learned what they're needed for. And this is what we're talking about. And not only just talking, this is what we're doing. So, all right, so this thing is populated, so let me go ahead and give it a whirl. So again, today is about, actually also if you want to be included in this, I think it kind of populates now based on your comments. So if you just wanted to type even a period, a wholeness or something like that inside the chat, if you wanted to enter into today's giveaway of the university, then you'll just need to do that. That way it just populates you. And so I'm gonna give it another 15 seconds for anybody that wants to be included in this to go ahead and, okay, yeah, I think this is still online. The live button is kind of gone, not live, but yeah, it's still live. All right, so I'm gonna let it breathe for a minute. I feel so amazing, like it's only beginning though. Like I'm in the regenerative process now, so you can only imagine. But I've torn this thing completely down because remember, when we rebuild and we build organs and planets, which are organs are planets, we build them in balance. Then we're riding with a planetary system inside of our own internal cosmos, and those organs are balanced. Because remember, your organs renew themselves in very short periods. The liver renews itself completely within 3 months. So our mindsets, our consumption is controlling what our planets inside are being built from. So when we're always getting these suggestions of division and I'm feeling bad and all these kind of things, they're coming because the consumptions that we were engaged in were actually the elements that promote that. And when we're aware of that, that's why I say the consumption becomes more important than the reproduction, because the reproduction is produced from the consumption. You know, common sense ain't common, but hey, we're working with this. Okay, so it should be long enough now for it to populate. So here we are. We're going to hit that button and we're going to roll it. In fact, today we're going to give away 2 universities. Since we generally have 2 courses or 2 a product and a course and something like that to give away, we're going to give away 2 semesters of the university today. So the first roll is bada bing, bada boom, Adi Rose. Let me do a screen share here so you know that it's transparent. Let me see. I think we would be. Oh, come on. Why you guys always got that one activated? So I guess let me try to put this over here. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to push this. Boom. Whoa. What's up with this? Let me see. Push this. Okay. So what you're looking at is the winner of today's university. And it is Audie Rose Nate. She can contact us via the chat box that is on our site, which is secretenergy.com. In the bottom, you can contact us and say, hey, I won. I'm Audie Rose. And just give us your name and your email address, and we'll be able to get you signed up for that course, and then you'll receive credentials. So I'm going to do this again. Also, remember, you can gift this to someone. If you're already a member of the university and you win, you can give it to somebody else, and I'm sure it'll be instrumental in their lives. You also could choose between semester 1 and semester 2. So I'm going to roll it again. Bada bing, bada boom. And that would be Ahi Efunyomi is the next winner of the university. So there it is today. We've given away university to get those on the path to understanding completely with themselves. And as I said before, if this is something that you feel gravitated towards, you like the energy that is happening here, we invite you to ambassador training. And again, if you have any kind of financial restraints right now and you just need to get that thing freed up, take the specialist training. It's absolutely free and available on our site. Aho, wholeness. Thank you for everything. I'll see you soon.